Hi there, thanks for listening in to this talk. My name is Sophie and I'm a wellbeing practitioner at Centre 33, and I'm here today to talk to you about stress with a specific focus on exam and academic stress. This is part one of the series on this topic. Part two is about managing exam stress, and would really encourage you to listen to both of these talks. So in terms of what we'll be covering today, we're going to start by exploring what we mean by stress and also what kind of things can generally contribute to stress building up. Then we will look at exam and academic stress more specifically and think about some of those pressures, and also common ways that people might experience stress, those signs and symptoms. I'll then talk a bit about how stress can build up and how we can reduce it. I'm not going to go too much detail about strategies today, as that's all covered in part two of this topic, but I would like to finish by sharing a calming activity with you. So first of all, what do we mean by stress? Stress is a normal human feeling and response, and something that we all experience from time to time in life. It often occurs if we're in difficult situations, we feel we have too much on our plate, or we're feeling like we can't cope with things. Stress is our body's way of responding to a stressor or stressors, whether that's a build-up of pressure or perhaps feeling threatened. When we feel stressed, our bodies release certain hormones to prompt us to respond to the causes. This is otherwise known as the fight, flight, and freeze response. Stress isn't always a bad thing. Low levels of stress can be helpful for some people to encourage and to motivate us to get things done. It can also help us to keep ourselves safe. Higher levels of stress, however, and ongoing stress, so stress that lasts for a long period of time, can often feel overwhelming and exhausting, and it can impact on other aspects of our well-being and health. So it can affect people's mental health and make people perhaps more likely to experience anxiety or depression. It can also affect our physical health and our immune system. And it can affect what we are able to do or what we feel able to do. So that might, for example, have an impact on academic performance. We often hear of the fight, flight, freeze response in terms of anxiety. However, it's also the same response for stress too. Stress and anxiety are often used interchangeably. However, there are some differences. So stress is often caused by external factors, as we will come on to, and if these are reduced or taken away, then the stress should also decrease. Anxiety, on the other hand, is one way that someone might respond to stress, and if problematic anxiety develops, that can continue even after the original source has been removed. So for those of you who might not have heard about the FFF response, we wanted to explain it briefly in the context of exam stress, as understanding why certain changes occur can be a really helpful first step. So when our stress or FFF response is activated, our bodies go into protective mode, and certain changes happen to evoke us to respond by either fighting, so addressing the issue head on, fleeing, so escaping or avoiding the situation, or freezing, so hiding or literally freezing up. In the context of exam stress, these are some of the ways that we might experience each of these responses. So a fight response could look like us directing all our energy towards a task in a really short space of time. While this could be useful and help with motivation, it could also lead to exhaustion or burnout. It might look like somebody having too much energy to actually focus, or getting frustrated or angry and giving up on the task. A flight response might look like somebody avoiding revision or procrastinating from revision, not going to an exam or leaving during an exam, or difficulty staying focused if your mind's elsewhere. And lastly, a freeze response could look like difficulty getting started on a task or staying focused on a task, such as revision or an exam question. Your mind may be going blank in the exam hall, or difficulty putting thoughts into words. There are a number of different things which can contribute to stress building up. On the screen here, we have some of the more common factors. So personal factors could include experiencing illness or injury. experiencing a bereavement, being a victim of abuse or a crime, having to manage uncertainty or going through big life changes, feeling like things are out of your control. Relational factors might include fallings out with friends or family, going through a breakup, or having a caring role. Factors relating to education or employment, such as having to complete difficult tasks or having too many tasks to juggle at once, starting something new and feeling out of your depth, or not being in education or employment and the pressures that can come with that. Housing factors could include not living in suitable housing conditions, being unstably housed, or being homeless. Financial factors could include worries about money or benefits or paying bills or living in poverty. And lastly, social factors could include things like not having access to the right services locally, experiencing or being aware of unpleasant or concerning events going on, whether that's in your local community or around the world, or experiencing discrimination or stigma from others. So hopefully you can see that there are a number of different things that can really understandably cause stress to build up. And while I've talked mainly about more negative factors here, stress can also be caused by positive things or events. Not only does stress tend to involve the presence of these things, but it usually also includes a feeling of us not being able to cope with them, whether that's because they're outside of our control, they're too big or too difficult for us to manage, or we aren't able to address them as soon as we'd like. And I wanted to share these with you because while I know that most of you are probably here to hear specifically about exam and academic stress, for many of you, there may well be other things going on in your lives which add to that stress further. So to think now specifically about academic pressure, we recognise that there can be a lot of academic pressure and expectations put on young people going through education. And these pressures can come from a number of different sources. So school or college often play a part in this pressure building in terms of, say, the things that staff say in the lead up to exams, the heavy focus on grades, or the amount of workload and the number of exams that you need to do. You might be feeling pressure from family, whether that's explicit things they say or more subtly around your academic work and grades and future plans. You might also be setting yourself expectations and therefore putting pressure on yourself to do well. And there's nothing wrong at all with having high expectations and wanting to do well. And people may well find that motivating, but we know that this can easily slip into unhelpful pressure if we're not careful. As humans, we make so many comparisons to people around us, so it's understandable if you're comparing your grades or your knowledge or your skills to your peers. Again, that may be a helpful motivation, but it could also affect stress and other things such as self-esteem and confidence. Wider society can set high expectations and pressures for young people, such as, again, a strong focus on exam assessments and seeing grades as a reflection of ability. And last but not least, we recognise that COVID has certainly had a huge impact for many young people, in many ways, but specifically educationally. The disruption and delay and uncertainty around education over the past couple of years is a really understandable source of stress. And I can imagine that for those of you who haven't sat an in-person exam for a while, or perhaps not at all, that upcoming exams are feeling really scary. So I hope that this slide helps normalise the stress that you might be experiencing at the moment and helps to show that it's not your fault if you're feeling stressed, that stress can build up from a number of different places. While in part 2, I'm sure my colleague is going to cover some of these messages, I just wanted to say that while it can be hard to distance yourself from the opinions and the desires of others, your well-being is what is most important. So do try not to take unhelpful comments or views to heart, and do what you need to do to look after yourself. Focusing on the short term and what you can do to get through each day and week. And also, grades aren't the be all and end all. You trying your best is what matters, and looking after yourself in the process. While it might feel like the end of the world if things don't quite go to plan, there are always other options and other ways forward, and support is out there to navigate that. So what does feeling stressed look like? While we think of stress as a feeling, it can affect the way we feel physically, the way we think, and the way we behave too. On the slide here are some other emotions that you might feel if you're stressed, such as feeling overwhelmed, scared, annoyed, anxious, exhausted, or upset. As I mentioned, the FFF response causes physical changes in our bodies, and on the screen here are some of the quite common ones, such as feeling sweaty or achy, changes to your breathing, feeling tired or getting headaches, feeling sick or getting stomach aches, and a difficulty concentrating or remembering things. These physical symptoms can be unpleasant and may be worrying if we don't understand why we're experiencing them. So reminding yourself that they're a normal part of the FFF response and aren't going to last forever might be helpful in the moment. When we're in a stress response, we may think in a slightly different way. On the screen here are some examples of common worries young people may have around exam time. These thoughts often involve predicting that we aren't going to do well in both the short term and negative outcomes in the longer term too. And also often thinking negatively or underestimating ourselves and our abilities. And lastly, stress can cause certain behavioural changes, such as affecting our appetite, causing us to want to eat more or less than usual, affecting our sleep patterns, causing us to need to sleep more or less than usual, causing an increase in coping strategies, such as fiddling with things, biting our nails, or turning to substances to help us manage. The flight response might prompt us to avoid doing things like revising or going to the exam. You might be fidgety and restless or procrastinate from the task. Again, being aware of changes in your behaviour when you're stressed can help you to recognise when you're starting to feel stressed, so that hopefully you can do something then to prevent it building up. While stress can often build up from external sources, as we've talked about, it can lead to anxious patterns developing in a person's thoughts, feelings, and behaviours. What we have on the screen here is an example of how a vicious cycle can build up and keep anxiety going. If, for example, someone is having thoughts such as, my mind's going to go blank and I'm going to fail the exam, I'm useless, what's the point? Or I'm going to mess everything up and I'm going to ruin my future. That's understandably going to impact on how that person's feeling and may well, if it hasn't already, activate that FFF response, causing someone to perhaps feel overwhelmed, upset, perhaps they're feeling sick. And then because of these worries and these unpleasant emotions and physical symptoms, a person might then behave in a certain way. So this person might not bother revising if they think that they're going to fail the exam. They might try to revise but not be able to focus. Or they might stay up all night worrying and trying to work and so end up being really tired the next day. These behaviours might then add to or reinforce those original worries, keeping this cycle going. It might help to complete a similar diagram about your experiences to help you to better understand what's going on for you and how these different areas might be interacting. There are different ways to help break this cycle, which will be covered more in the second talk. However, things such as challenging our thoughts, practicing relaxation exercises to calm the physical symptoms, and changing our behavioural responses can all help. What I'd like to do now is show you a short video about how stress can build up and how we can manage it.
When trying to measure our stress tolerance, the bucket analogy can be helpful. Our stress tolerance, or the size of our bucket, is a product of our genes, personality, and life experiences, and its size varies from person to person. The water in this analogy is the combination of all the stress in your life. We use the coping strategies we have available to keep our bucket from overflowing. They are like taps that allow water to drain from the bucket. Stress can include training, work, school, relationship, or the loss of a loved one. Both positive and negative experiences will affect the water level. A big bucket can hold more water or stress before it overflows. With a smaller bucket, less water is required for the water or stress level to become critical. While you can't change the size of your bucket, you can make life adjustments to reduce water coming in. You can also learn new coping strategies and stress management techniques to allow water to drain out. Mind tools, exercise, quality sleep, relaxation, and sharing your feelings with friends are some examples of effective water taps. Staying up late, sleeping in, drugs, inactivity, procrastination, suppressing or ignoring problems are examples of unhelpful coping strategies, but actually result in water flowing back into your... Created by Brave.
So as that video talked about, a good way of thinking about stress is to liken it to a bucket. And as you can see at the top in orange on the slide here, there are some examples of stresses around study and exams which might cause that water or that stress to build up, such as having a difficult exam and then maybe getting home afterwards to a family argument, technology breaking on you during revision, lacking motivation and so running out of time to revise, having back-to-back assignments, or pressure from others to get good grades. All of these things can contribute to water being poured into that bucket. As the video talked about, we want to think about whether anything can be done to lessen or to remove those stresses. We also want to think about what we can do to add more taps or holes to the bottom of the bucket to release some of this water and prevent it from overflowing. Some examples in blue on screen, and in the second talk, will hopefully give you lots more ideas of ways to add more holes to your bucket. Again, as the video mentioned, there are a number of different factors which might affect how we cope with and manage stress. Different people will be able to handle different amounts. To continue the bucket example, not only do people have different amounts of water being poured in and different numbers and sizes of holes in the bottom, people also have different size buckets in the first place. The following are examples of what might affect how we handle stress, and it's often a combination of things. So the amount of pressure that we're under might affect how we handle the stress, the amount of support that we have or that we feel we have, the resources we have access to, our experience of managing those situations, so the amount of experience we have and how well or badly past experiences went. Our level of emotional resilience can affect how we handle stress, and as mentioned in the video, this can be affected by a number of different things, including genetics, early life events, personality, social and economic circumstances. And also how we perceive the situation can affect it as well. So what I'd perhaps like you to take away from today and think about is what your stress bucket looks like. It can be a really helpful first step to managing stress to work out exactly what the stresses are, so the things pouring the water into our bucket, and also what currently works and doesn't work for managing this, so those holes at the bottom. So maybe drawing yourself a diagram, a bit like the one on screen, or just making a list of these things and ask yourself the following questions. So what is it specifically about exams that's causing me to feel stressed? Is it the amount of revision? Is it a specific subject? Is it actually sitting the exam itself? And if so, what is it about having to do that? Is there anything else going on that's contributing to my stress? As we've said, it's normal for people to have other things going on in their lives that contribute to that feeling of stress. Maybe these things are really obvious to you, or maybe you have that stressed feeling, but you aren't quite sure why. Then ask yourself whether anything can be done to reduce or remove these stresses. This might help you to work out specific things you can do to either lessen the amount of water being poured into your bucket, or to add other holes to the bottom of the bucket to manage these feelings. And in terms of the holes at the bottom, asking yourself, what do I currently do to let the water out? What helps me to cope? What helps me to feel calm? What else could I try doing? Perhaps asking your friends or family what they do to calm down might help. Like I say, part 2 of this talk will cover lots more strategies and tips for managing exam-specific stress that will hopefully help you to add more holes to the bottom of the bucket. If you need further support with your mental health, we really encourage you to reach out to someone, whether that's a trusted adult in your family or your community, or one of the people or organisations on the slide here. So that could be the pastoral or the wellbeing team at your school, college, university, your teachers for practical support around revising and taking exams, your GP, so that's your doctor. There are also some organisations that can provide support. So Kooth, for example, provides online mental health information, tips and support. And that's both peer support and support from professionals as well. The Mix and Young Minds are organisations that provide information and support specifically around young people's mental health. Anxiety UK is a national organisation that provides support and information specifically around anxiety. And lastly, the website Keep Your Head is a local website that provides information, tips and signposting both to local organisations and national ones as well. You can, of course, always reach out to Centre 33 for support, whether that's with practical issues or emotional needs. So whether it's a one-off chat about something as and when you need it, or for more ongoing support, we can help with a wide range of things, including mental health, housing, employment, money, sexual health, and young carers. You can contact us Monday to Friday, 12 to 5 p.m, and Saturdays 10 till 1 p.m, or leave a message outside these times. And you can get in touch with us by calling, by texting or WhatsApping, by emailing. We also have reopened some of our drop-ins around the county, so do check out our website, www.centre33.org.uk, to find out the latest locations and opening times. So I'd like now to talk you through a calming activity. Firstly, because I appreciate that even thinking about exams during this talk may well have brought up some feelings of anxiety or stress for you. So I wanted to finish on a bit more of a calming note. And also because I think this is a really good activity to practice to use during revision and even during exam time. The activity involves creating a calm and happy place in your mind and then taking yourself into this place whenever needed. We'd suggest creating this place in advance of when you might need it and to really practice imagining that place to help strengthen its positive effects. So I'm now going to talk through the activity and I'd like everyone to close their eyes and have a go at doing this. So I'd like you now to take a few slow and deep breaths. And imagine a place where you feel calm, happy and safe. This might be somewhere that you've been before, or a specific happy memory you have. It may be somewhere you've always wanted to visit, or it could be a place in a fantasy world. Really immerse yourself in this image. Look around you and picture all of the different things that are going on. And while you're doing this, ask yourself the following questions using each of your senses. So what does the place look like? What can you see? Are there any other people or creatures around, or are you alone? What's the weather like there? What sounds can you hear in this place? Are there some close by and others further away? Maybe your favourite music is playing, or maybe there's no sound at all. What textures can you feel around you? Are you sitting or standing on something? Maybe you're floating. What can you touch nearby? Are those objects hard or soft, warm or cold? What scents can you smell? If you're in nature, maybe you can smell flowers or plants. Maybe you can smell your favourite food being prepared. And lastly, what can you taste? Are you eating or drinking anything in this restful place? Really focus on creating and experiencing all of the details of your very own calm space using each of your senses. And now I'd like you all to take 3 more deep breaths. And when you're ready, slowly open your eyes again. Hopefully you were able to create a calming image. If not, don't worry, it can take some practice. If you did, you might like to give this place a name to associate with it, so that when you want to take yourself back into this place again, you just have to think of that word. Like with learning any new skill, the more you practice imagining this place and using all of your senses to explore it, the stronger the image should hopefully get. And so the more of a calming effect it should have on you. So thank you very much for listening into this talk. I really hope that you found it helpful. And don't forget to watch part 2 of the subject on managing exam stress, where my colleague will be sharing lots of practical tips and techniques with you.